Hey everyone.
Hi.
Hey,
Let me just get a hold of Steve here. He's asking to be let in. Okay. Great to see you all here. Welcome to another link gathering. Hope everybody's doing well. Steve has no picture. Hang on one second.
Oh, start my video. All right. There we go. Okay.
Yeah, maybe the best thing to do is to get right into it. Oh, we lost
Jade.
one. Anyway, might be best if we just start and maybe introduce yourself and then go right into your presentation. Ken, it looks like your microphone's active. Maybe you can start.
Okay. Hi, I'm Ken. I've been on Link. I think I started in 2014, so 5 or 6 years ago, though not very seriously for the first year and a half or so. And then I started to do it more regularly. I had started Russian when I was a freshman in high school, so a long time ago, and did well at it. I learned the grammar pretty well, but like everyone says, I didn't learn enough words to do much with it. Always kept an interest in the language, didn't really do much with it until I picked it up again. Started finding more sources on the internet as that became a thing. So much different than when I started. It was so hard to find sources back then. Anything from Russia. I think there was one company that imported books and magazines and newspapers from Russia to the U.S. at the time that you could get stuff through. Of course, you could find some stuff in books at used book sales and stuff, but it's just made such a, when I found I could find all sorts of Russian stuff on the internet, that's when I started picking it up again. I did make a trip to Russia, to the Soviet Union, actually, when I was just after I finished high school. Behind me is my map, my Politicheskaya Karta Mira that I bought in Moscow in 1979, I think. So since I knew the grammar pretty well, my vocabulary was limited. I mostly have, I don't do a whole lot of listening on Link. I import a lot of stuff that doesn't have audio. I will listen to anybody who does Russian on Link, knows Yevgeny Bukhanovsky. Yeah, I'll watch and listen to a lot of his stuff that he puts up that's interesting, but otherwise I mostly just import stuff. And big leaps in vocabulary have come from books. Once you get enough to get an interesting book that just, as everybody knows who's tried it, it just brings you along so much faster. And some of the books I've liked so much, I've actually went out and got a hardcover copy of Lavr, which I read on Link first, just because it's nice to have something to hold in your hands from that era. I'm going to share my screen real quick. Go over how I do some things. Just briefly, I mean, this is our 5th week of this. There's not going to be a whole lot of new in what you can do, but maybe some of the philosophy, about how and why. If you can see my screen here in Russian. I won't spend a lot of time here because probably most of the people can't make any sense of these letters, which is a little bit annoying. But first, I'll point out that
I don't think somehow I'm not seeing
you're
your
not seeing
screen.
it. Okay, here.
The share screen button in the middle.
Okay, I selected it, but didn't say share. There it goes.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay. So first thing is I do for anybody who's starting in Russian is you might want to choose the Cyrillic, or the serif font, because there's a couple letters that always, you know, are hard to pick out sometimes, especially when your eyes are tired. The L and the P here in Schlapu are very similar, though with the serif font, the weight and the strokes is a little bit different. If you switch over to the standard font, those look very similar, especially when they're smaller. I've increased the font size here to make it a little bit easier to see when sharing. But anyway, when I do reading in Russian, I deselect most of these things in the settings. I let the grammar tagging go, even though I really haven't used that. But the other things I just want to handle manually or whatnot. I always, even if I know the words, I will link and keep linked. I won't move to known, usually multi-word links phrases, because even if you know the words, Председатель I know, Правление I know, but it's not necessarily obvious that together they mean chairman of the board, things like that. So that's about it for Russian, really. Some of the sources I use, I read, my stats on link won't show much at all for listening, though I listen for hours a day on YouTube mostly. Any number of bloggers, commentators, and such. When I started back on Russian here, my listening comprehension was nil. Some listening on link help watching movies, bloggers and stuff, and even if you don't understand them, the visuals can grab you. You understand enough of what's going on. It's interesting. You tune your ear, and eventually you stop trying to translate in your head. You can just hear and listen. Some of the channels I watch, I can understand everything they say, and I just listen, forget I'm listening to Russian. Other people that I don't know why, the vocabulary, the pronunciation, it's still a struggle though. But one thing I noted when I offered to come on here is that, so I've got lots of Russian. I just recently started on German, and so I use it different for German. So people are always asking, how do I use link? What's the best way to use link? It's a lot of it will depend on what your, what your level are, what you're doing. And in German, I'm on the 53rd mini story. I always use sentence mode, and I'll use the audio so I can learn it. I don't have any of the experience with the past experience like I had with Russian. And I'll listen to the sentence, and I'll listen to the sentence 4 or 5 times till it sounds natural. I can get the meaning, how it's kind of put together, just from listening. And I'll do that. Then I'll go to the next one. At the very end of the lesson, I'll review the links, just a little bit more exposure, familiarity. Having just gone through the story, I usually get them all without any problem, and they'll all forget them later. But then after doing that, then I'll go through it and I'll listen to and read the entire story. You just follow along in the full text while the narrator talks. Just starting on German, you see I only got 618 used known words, and probably 3/4 of those are cognates. It's such a, German is so much nicer after coming from Russian. It's like half the words you kind of put on your Yodo vibe to get the sentence structure, and it's been fun so far. Like I said, I'm just starting. It's so much easier to read too, even though I've known the Cyrillic alphabet for decades, and it's very phonetic and easy to see what a word means. It's just not what you were doing since you were 5 years old, and it's slow. I cannot not read it as fast as I can even the German here. So no, just a couple other things to share, and I'll turn it over to some others. I've got this book from when I was a sophomore in high school, I think. I don't know if this was my copy, if I found one at a used book sale and got it for nostalgia reasons. But it's a collection of stories. And at the introduction, I know it says it's a graded reader. It's got glosses in the margin to help you with some words that you might find. It's got accent marks on the words so you can figure out the pronunciation. And as I was looking at this, I was thinking, Link pretty much replaces this. Link's has got the graded text, you know, by ability. It's got the pronunciation. It's got the glosses right there next to the words if you need them. But this has got some good, interesting stories, a number of which I've actually.
Can I interrupt? It would be easier to see the book if unshared.
Oh yeah, well, if you're sharing your screen, we can see better what you're.
Yeah, I was holding it up. I could see it, but so how do I get out of share?
I think down same place where you shared. If you hover down at the bottom of the screen, or maybe even at the top. There's. There you go.
Don't know.
Here we go. No.
View options, maybe.
Can somebody take it away from me, maybe?
I'm gonna.
I'm not seeing.
Share screen.
I see. I assume the whole screen here.
Yeah, is it the? No, it's not the share screen button at the bottom, is it?
Here it is. I found it's on a different monitor.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Here's the book. See, it's got the glosses and the margins and the text. It's probably too small to see. It's got the accent marks. But like I was saying, this was great when I was in school. It's interesting. The content's interesting, but you know that pretty much everything this offers you find on Link. As long as you can find the interesting content, there's an awful lot there. One of the stories I particularly remember, even though it was decades ago, actually a series of stories that I've actually found online. Anybody who's looking for some good low intermediate level on Russian, you might search for Как Papa был маленьким, when Papa was little. It's a series of stories in a book by an author that I found online. They're very, very short. Fairly easy to read, interesting. But anyway, another question that comes fully related to Russian or German, a question that comes up fairly regularly is how do you learn these foreign scripts, Russian, Arabic, or whatever. I took a couple semesters, once a week, adult education, no grades, easy, relaxed, interesting Arabic class at the junior college. Before doing that, I'd gotten this book, and you can find material like this, and any number of books are online. This is specifically the beginner's Arabic script. You know, introduces a letter or a few letters at a time. First chapter, 6 letters, how to write them, how and when to join them or not, and then a couple, a handful of words that use them, and then the next chapter adds a few more letters and a few more words, and it goes on. And it's easy to do it that way. I didn't find the Arabic script difficult. The Russian script is easy because it's so phonetic, and half of it's familiar and the half that's not familiar. I never confuse the R for P when I'm in Cyrillic. So that's really about all I've got to share. I've got my German made simple that I picked up somewhere, used a long time ago and never cracked, and I have my doubts about the simple part. It's full of grammar tables and stuff. One thing I do online that I mentioned in the forums is I like to watch videos, one of Russian language videos teaching English. For some reason, I just find it interesting to listen to. But also, there's, whoops, I don't want that. The Polyglot series, Russian TV series, Dmitry Petrov, has a series about a large number of different languages, and I just like to watch those. Hindu, whatever, just listen to him talk about these in Russian. I've watched a number of his videos about German, and I'll probably watch more. He really gets his introduction to German, he talks about how a philosophy that sounds a whole lot, that'll sound very familiar with folks familiar with LingQ. You know, don't stress over the grammar too much, get into it, get the content and the meaning. And then he gets into lessons and it's all grammar tables and stuff. But after going through most of the mini stories here and seeing a lot of things that, seeing some patterns and stuff, I'll probably watch those videos just to see him cover the tenses and cases and stuff. And then, so then when I go back and read more German, when I see those things, it'll click a bit more. What exactly am I seeing? It'll help maybe cement those patterns a little bit more quickly.
Okay.
I
Great.
think I've taken
Yeah,
the
that's
floor
great.
enough. I can turn
That's
it
great.
over.
We've got a few questions here, and so maybe we'll move on and answer some of them. Very interesting presentation. Yeah, a lot of stuff there that I know matches with stuff that I do. I mean, certainly reading books is, I've always found, at least vocabulary wise, leads to massive sort of jumps in your known words and ability, obviously, to understand the language. So I definitely find that. There was a question here, and and maybe we could Steve, maybe we can have some comments from you, and then we can look at some of these other questions. You seem to be muted.
Dude.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, do we want to, yeah, maybe I could just make some quick comments, but I'm also looking forward to listening to the other people here. But certainly, as you say, lots in Ken's presentation that's familiar, including 20, 30 years ago, scouring secondhand bookstores here in Vancouver to find old readers in German or other languages with the glossaries for each chapter and lots of pencil scribblings that people had done, and all of the sort of before LingQ. And in a way, that's almost what inspired us to get into LingQ. Mini stories as well. I'm very curious to hear, Ken, as a beginner in German, how difficult did you find it to jump right into the mini stories?
Not difficult at all. I'd actually, a long time ago in college, I had 1/2 of one semester of German. So I didn't get much, but there's more is familiar than I would have expected.
Yeah.
But even so, like I said, compared to Russian, it's an entirely different language than English, obviously, but it's coming from Russian is so obviously related to English.
Yeah, and another comment that I certainly agree with is, like, I studied Russian many years, and I'm much better in Russian than Czech. But when I got to read a Slavic language in the Latin alphabet, it's just so much easier. Because as you said, you cannot account, you can't make up for the fact that since the age of 5, you've been reading in your native alphabet. And if you learn another alphabet, it's always going to be more difficult to read in that alphabet. But I'm interested in the mini stories because I jumped into the mini stories with Greek, with Persian, with Arabic, and I found that a great place to start. Like, even though you're jumping into a sort of a low intermediate level type of content, there's so much repetition in each mini story. The same vocabulary and structure basically repeats 5 times. And so that I find that it's a great place to start. But that's my experience. So I'm very interested.
And we'll often get people that come on and complain because they're right into, whether it's mini stories or some other beginner text, and wanting instead to be, learning cat, dog, flower.
How are you?
Mom. And in fact, I think our part of our message always is just do it. Just let your brain get used to it. Read those sentences. And what's great, obviously, with the mini stories is there's repetition there built into the text, so that it should help.
I was a little bit struck by in some of the later mini stories. So I'm up in the 50s now, I guess. You get some fairly long, complex sentences, but not right away, and they weren't too much. German has a lot more helper words, a lot more words to put the phrase together than Russian does. And so,
but as I say, it worked for me, and languages as different as Persian, Arabic, Greek. So I'm just curious to hear people's reactions. If it were me, if I were the czar, I would start everybody on the mini stories. No numbers, colors, names of your uncle, aunt, father, mother, how are you, post office, none of that stuff. Right into the mini stories. And listen to them often, read them often, and you just build up traction, you build up familiarity, you gain. I'm surprised you only have 600 known words. When I was at 60 mini stories in Persian or Arabic, I was several thousand known words.
I haven't been very active in moving them to known.
No, I don't move them to known.
Sometimes I'll click on them, but sometimes I just let them go.
No, but if you go through a story, if you turn the page, anything you didn't click on should register as a known word.
Yeah, but there aren't that many words in those mini
Really?
stories.
It's not
No,
my
I mean I did them in Japanese. Like you don't get that many words from them, I don't find.
Really? Okay. Anyway, I don't want to monopolize it. Okay.
So we should probably keep moving here.
Yeah.
Antonio, how's it going? Maybe you can go next.
Hey everyone, how are you doing? Hope you're fine. Well, my name's Antonio. I'm from Spain. We've met before, Mark.
Yeah,
some time ago.
For sure.
And yeah, I've been using LingQ for many years, probably 5 or 6 years on and off. But I've been using it recently to improve a couple of languages. And yeah, I think it's a great resource.
Great.
Should I share my screen or?
Yeah, sure. Please let us know and show us, whatever you want to show, how you use LingQ, what you find helpful for you.
Well, I've been using LingQ for different languages, for improving my English, French, and Italian mainly. And now I'm improving my German. I started it a couple of years ago, and I started with the starter manuals like Teach Yourself or Assimil. And once you do that, which is, I think, the most boring part, then you can actually enjoy the language. For example, now I'm improving my German with news. There's a podcast of the Deutsche Welle, which is Langsam gesprochene Nachrichten, which is about the daily news. They post it every day, and you can read it and listen to it at the same time, which is good. Myself, I work in an industry where I have to talk every day to a lot of clients, either by email or by phone, and I try and do this in their own languages. So if I was about to call a German client tomorrow, it's nice to talk about the current news, especially coronavirus and so on. So I try and read and listen to things that interest me and that I can find useful. And that's easy to do on LingQ.
Great.
All right.
That content from Deutsche Welle, is that you're going there and then you're importing that into LingQ then?
I just do it with my phone. I do it with the app. So I just click on share and import it into LingQ.
Right.
So you've got the audio and the text automatically.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah, Deutsche Welle has lots of great content for sure, if any.
Yeah, especially the news, but you need to have a base to understand it, because if not, you'll have too many words that you don't understand. So that comes after a couple of months of study.
Yeah.
I might comment here. I think what's important in what Antonio is saying is that if we can get into content that is interesting, and sometimes can be difficult, as you say, you need to have enough words, otherwise it's a bit of an uphill struggle. I'm kind of in that situation right now with my Arabic and Persian, that the news podcasts, which someone transcribes for me, are still just like too much hard work. So at least in the Persian, I have this person giving me a simplified history of Iran, which we have on our Persian section, which is really excellent. And I just love going through it. The Arabic, I like our news feed at LingQ, because sometimes I get bored with my Arabic podcast. And so I wonder what other people are studying. I go to the news feed and I found this really neat stuff, something about education in Levantine. It's in sort of a mixture of standard Arabic and Levantine Arabic and education in Jordan and stuff like that. And so I'm working my way through that. And then I suddenly realized, you know, I don't have the impression that I'm making any progress. It seems that it's always difficult for me. And I'm putting in an hour a day of listening, and I'm putting in another 45 minutes or so of fighting my way through these things, varying levels of difficulty. The Iranian history is really interesting. But I know in my heart of hearts that I'm improving. And I think one of the messages, and I'm sure Antonio and you will all agree, we have to be patient. Like, we just have to continue doing it. We listen a bit here, we work our way through some texts there. Slowly, we're adding to our known words total. We are improving. If we're putting in that hour and a half a day, we are improving, even though it seems at times as if we're not. And that's where it's really useful to get either interesting stuff like Deutsche Welle for news, or finding something new on our feed, so that we don't get bored, because we just have to stay the course. That would be my one comment.
And I've actually found news really interesting. I've been doing this actively for a month. So in the beginning, there were many words that I didn't understand at all, especially in the last month, everyone's speaking about coronavirus every day. So after 2 or 3 weeks, you come across all these words that you didn't know at the beginning, maybe written in a different form, in a different tense, but you start remembering those words. The news are actually quite good if you do that on a daily basis.
Especially if you're in sort of a similar topic, if you're seeing articles about a similar topic, that's a great way to reinforce the vocabulary. I know I've been reading news articles in Japanese, and I find news tough in Japanese because it's more sort of word dense, I guess, and
Lots of kanji,
and it's you have there's the only way to learn words in Japanese pretty much is to see them and see them and see them, because you can't read them if you've never seen them before, more or less. I mean, you have to see them and understand what they mean. So you end up, it's very word dense, and it's work, but you get better, especially if you can find related articles with similar vocabulary. But it's definitely a challenge when you first start getting into news about serious topics. And anyway, it's compared to, say, Italian, where you get a lot of cognates, I think, as Ken was pointing out with German, it's a challenge for sure. Yeah, great. Anything else to add, Antonio?
Well, if you want, I can quickly share my screen to show what I've been doing. What can I do? All right. Can you see the screen?
Yep.
All right. So that's what I've been doing in German. If you see on my lessons, quick imports. Quick imports is the thing I use the most, because you can just find whatever you want. So this is a really interesting source. So you see today's news, I've already done that. They post it every day, and then you can look for other ones. I've used LingQ for other languages as well, and I've come to, let's say, well, in German I've learned 14,000 words, which is, I think it's still not enough to be completely professional in German, but in other languages like, I don't know, English or Italian or French, that's more than enough. So you can actually keep track of what you're doing here. And what I've actually found interesting, I've been using it for several years, and LingQ has been growing. The community and the challenges that you've been setting are quite interesting, because you can see what other people are doing. It's in Spanish, by the way. These are challenges, so you can see what other people in the same situation as you are doing. And I think so one of my friends was developing another app for learning languages, and he found out with a massive survey that people without a community don't actually learn the same way. So that, I think that's a really positive thing that you did with the challenges. All right.
Great. Yeah, I mean, everything we can do to every little thing we do to try and motivate people in different ways, all just kind of contributes to keeping people motivated. I mean, we'd like it that everybody was perpetually self-motivated, but we know that external motivation can help just keep people going. And if we keep going, as Steve said, just put the time in, if you're doing what you do on Link, you're getting better, even though sometimes you may not feel you are, your vocabulary is increasing and your familiarity is increasing. Yeah. Okay. Well, Antonio, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Maybe we'll switch to, and let's hear from Jade now. Jade, nice to meet you. Yeah.
Yep. Hey, nice to meet you too. Yep, so I'm still quite a newbie on Link. So I will try to share with you how I use it or how I've been using it so far. So how you can, as you can hear from my accent, I'm from the south of France. So, so up, if my internet will allow me to share my screen. Up, can you see it?
Yeah, looks like it's coming.
Okay, good. So up, right now I'm tackling like Swedish and Spanish.
Mhm.
So I've been mainly using songs. So I import thanks to Clara in one of your previous gatherings that shares a great website, Zero to Hero.
Mhm.
Oops. So I've been importing songs that I break down the lyrics with Link. And when I start to feel confident, and since in the chorus, the words tend to repeat themselves quite often, so I tend to absorb them quite quickly. So then I try after some time to sing along. So I'm a terrible singer, but I try it anyway. I think it's a good gymnastic for your mouth and your tongue to practice trying to follow sing-along songs in foreign language, in your target language. So that's what I've been using songs mainly for. And then for the mini stories, I enjoy listening to the audio first without reading the text. And since I tend to get distracted quite easily. If I'm just listening to the audio, I will be like, oh, something is happening somewhere, so I will get distracted quite easily. So I try to do stuff while I'm listening. So what I do is I take notes. So I try to listen to words that I recognize, write them down, and then when I switch to the text on Link, I will read the text, and while I'm reading, I will check if I got any of the words right and if I spelled them correctly. And sometimes I feel proud of myself, and sometimes I'm just like, and yeah, that's the main ways I've been using Link so far. So I try to trick my brain to think I'm not really working. So I find it more fun, and I think for me it's a trick because I have big trauma from school, like classes in language. So I try to trick my brain to think I'm not studying a language, but playing. So it's fun, at least for me, but those ways are working for me so far. So yeah.
Great. Yeah, that sounds as you say, a fun way, listening to songs. And are you going to sing for us today?
I will spare you the massacre.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
In the mini stories, are you using them for both Spanish and Swedish?
Yeah.
And when you started with them, were you a beginner in both Spanish and Swedish?
In Swedish, yep, I started from zero. So so first I listened to quite a lot of audio and read a little bit before getting into the mini stories.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had maybe 100 words of vocabulary already in my brain. And then I started to try to work on my writing and listening and writing at the same time.
Because as a French speaker, of course, Spanish will have a lot of similar vocabulary, so
Yep.
the reading is not so very difficult. But Swedish is quite different. So I'm just curious. And the pronunciation in Swedish is not that easy. Pronunciation in Spanish is quite easy. So I'm just curious. Like I asked this question because I want to understand how difficult people find it to use the mini stories as a place to begin. You know, I find it okay for languages like Greek, you know, whatever, Arabic, Persian, but then I'm used to learning in this way. I'm just wondering how difficult you found it.
Yeah, sure. So especially in French, because there's a lot of H sounds in Swedish and English too. And in French, we just ignore the H. So I think it's the main struggle I had with Swedish is a lot of sounds that are made from a couple of letters together that would make strange sounds that doesn't seem logical in French. So first I work on that, like I did some maths, like these letters together, of its these vowels follows, it will sound like that. And then I tried to, by listening, to write them down to, kind of see if there was a pattern, like. But then I quickly got, I think, since it's like quite close to English in some kind of way, I quickly got into it, and I find it not so difficult to understand. Speaking is another issue, but understanding and getting the words, not so much.
You know, you mentioned speaking. People sometimes say, well, how do you get to output? Because at LingQ, we tend to stress input. Although I have started speaking now more with our tutors. We have some good tutors in both Persian and Arabic on LingQ. So I hadn't spoken with my Iranian friend who's creating content for us at least 6 months. All I've been doing is listening and reading. And when I had my first lesson with her last week, she was amazed at how much I had improved. And similarly with my Arabic tutor. So it's just to remind people that, you know, it's nice to have a tutor session. I recommend it, you know, depending on one's level, once or twice a week, whatever. But even if you don't have that, if you're continuing to do the listening and reading, you are in fact improving at least your potential in the language, because you're becoming more familiar with the language, you're acquiring more words. When you start up speaking again, you actually, and I have found I end up further ahead than where I was, even though I haven't spoken for a long time. So it's just that the input, and and especially the mini stories, because it's all a lot of basic structure, basic vocabulary. It really does jumpstart your speaking, in my experience, but that may not be everyone's experience.
Yeah, and once you've accumulated like quite a strong passive vocabulary, I think it's easier after to just use it, and it feels like. And that's what I use. That's why I use songs, because a lot of sounds, and especially when you're born and raised in a monolingual family, you're not used to make certain sounds, and a certain muscle on around your mouth are not working at all. Like I think about Antonio, because Spanish has struggled so much with la R. It's one of my biggest trauma in Spanish. So I'm trying to, by singing along with songs, I'm trying to work my muscle up and to work on that.
One other comment that before I forget, you said when you listen, you tend to, your mind wanders and it's difficult to focus. So you try to write down the words that you hear just to force yourself to pay attention. And I don't do that, but I do agree that if you sit down and say, now I'm going to sit down and listen, I think it's very difficult not to have your mind wander. Very difficult. That's why I have a different approach than you do. My approach is I have to be doing something else. If I'm doing something else, the dishes, cleaning up, I'm running. And so then you don't mind if the mind wanders a little bit, because in a way you're getting that learning for free because you're actually doing something else. And I find that doing something else at the same time, I actually concentrate better than if I were, and I can't do it anymore. Sit down. Oh, now I'm going to listen to this language. I can't. I don't know why that is, maybe I feel I should be doing something else. But I think it is important that sometimes people think listening is, I'm going to listen to this lesson, I'm going to listen to it 10 times in a row, and I'm going to listen to it until I understand it. And that really, I don't think works that well, because if you're listening to the same lesson over and over and over again, the brain is learning less and less. So at the very least, you should go lesson 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, back to lesson 1. But it could be useful to do something else as well. Write down the odd word, do the dishes, whatever you're able to do at the same time. But just sitting there listening, hoping that you're going to pound that language into your brain may not be so efficient. At least that's been my experience.
Yeah, same for me, same for me.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely do my listening as well when I'm doing other things, and obviously going in and out, sometimes not listening for a long stretch as I daydream about something else, and now, back to, some piece of content grabs my attention again, and listen for a while. And I think that's natural. I don't know if that means for every hour of listening, you're actually only getting half an hour of real sort of listening benefit. I don't really know, but you end up doing far more listening, so that probably the benefit is still significant, obviously. I mean, it is. So anyway, it's just interesting.
By the way, I was going to say, it's a good thing I didn't wear my my red plaid shirt, or people wouldn't be able to tell Ken apart from me, you know.
When I was looking for Russian learning resources a few years ago, and I was, looking at different things showing up on searches on the internet, I came across this guy speaking Russian who looked a little bit like me. Piqued my interest, and found out he had a whole system for learning it. So
That's great. Where you're in the States somewhere, I guess, Ken?
yeah, I'm in the Midwest.
Okay. Yeah, well, great. Thanks, Jade. Great presentation. Thank you all. Super interesting. I think we have quite a few questions here, so maybe we can move on to the questions. Someone is asking, Ken, how many Russian words do you think you need to count yourself as more or less fluent? I have 40,000 Russian words, and I am far from being fluent in Russian.
I've got over 65,000 now by LingQ's count. And I always find words I don't know. But I listen, like I said earlier, I can listen fairly easily depending on what the person's talking about. You find obviously a lot more unknown words in literature. People's active spoken vocabulary is much smaller. I started on books. I had many fewer words, but those books are what got me up to where I am now. I can't really remember the number though. Whenever you feel, like trying something, try it, see how it goes. If it's too difficult, you don't have to keep up with it. My imported stories are full of things I started and never finished.
That's an interesting point. We get that question sort of, or you can tell people feel this compunction to finish what they started because that's been drilled into them from school. And we always have to sort of retrain people. If you start something and it's too hard or it's too easy or you don't like it, abandon it. Go find something else.
This book that I held up earlier, Lava, my vocabulary is much less when I started it. It helped a lot. It was a challenge because it's set in the 1400s during the time of the plagues. So I've set it aside. I don't feel like reading it right now. But it's full of, one, at times he has the speakers speak in archaic Russian that I didn't realize that at the time. I put questions on the forums, and the Russian natives would say, I have no idea what he's talking about. And secondly, he uses a lot of made up words about various things. So you just need to, you learn to recognize some of the archaic stuff and the made up stuff. You just, understand what the context is and move on.
You know what? I might just chime in on that. And there's also a question asking me what my level is in the CEFR, the European framework. I personally think we shouldn't get too obsessed. Like if you say fluency, so what what is fluency? I think fluency is the ability to understand what people are saying in most situations, to be able to communicate, express, whatever you want to say, but with mistakes. And there will always be things you don't understand. There's always things that you can't say. And I think we have to accept a certain level of imperfection, unless we're professional translators or something. You're always going to wish you were better than you are. And so there's always room to improve. And we just continue, in doing what we're doing as long as we enjoy it. First question, how many words you need to have to be fluent? I think to be fluent, you have to speak a lot. So, for example, in my Korean, I have 40,000 words. I'm not fluent in Korean. But with the words that I have, if I were to spend a couple of weeks in Korea, I think I would very quickly get to where, I can comfortably hold conversations. I just haven't spoken a lot. I do have a lot of words. I kind of have the feeling that for languages like Korean or even Czech, 60,000 is a good number. And so 40,000 is not quite enough in Russian. I think 60,000 is a good number, but I think you can take that 40,000 and push yourself to fluency if you have lots of opportunity to speak. So if you're in Russia, you're surrounded by Russians, you're speaking Russian, even that 40,000 word level is going to be good enough. But if you're back away from Russia, you could be in wherever, Germany or Brazil or somewhere. I think you need to push it up to 60,000, because if you're going to talk to Russian speakers, you're going to do it once or twice a week on the internet. That's not a lot of exposure. So if you took your 40,000 level, plunk yourself into Russia, surrounded by Russians, you'd very quickly get to fluent, in my opinion. But I see, like with Czech, I felt 60,000 was where I started to feel comfortable. Even at 40,000, there's so much that I don't understand when I listen. I had this series I was listening to on Czech history and stuff, and I listened to it, and I'm just not quite getting it at 40,000. But at 60,000, I was getting it all. And in Russian, my word level on LingQ is 90,000. Now, there's literally nothing that I hear on Russian that I don't understand. So, whatever it might be, I understand it. I understand the movies, I understand, but I'm at 90,000. But I can remember so long that, I used to go to Echo Moskvy, which isn't popular among certain people in Russia, but it's a tremendous website for Russian, because every day they have like 10 or 15 interviews with both audio and text. So that's just great content. I would get 4 or 5 interviews every day in the morning that I would listen to during the day, and then I would go and work them on LingQ in the evening. And it just took forever before I could really understand those interviews. And so I was at 40,000 and I still couldn't quite understand them. I think 60,000, and of course the word count varies, the significance varies from language to language. So in Korean or Slavic languages, your word count looks like it's, somewhat, exaggerated. In some other languages, maybe you reach that same level at 30,000. But as for my level on the CEFR, the question is, so undoubtedly I would be marked down in any Russian test because of the number of mistakes that I make on case endings, on verbs of motion, all this kind of stuff. I'm hitting it, whatever, my 30, 60%, 70%, 80%, but I'm making mistakes. So presumably that would, mark me down. However, I can sit in any conversation, I understand what everyone is saying, and I have no difficulty expressing myself. I was on TV in Kiev speaking both Russian and Ukrainian. And there was a big audience, and I was being asked questions, and I didn't have the slightest concern that I wouldn't understand and wouldn't be able to answer. But I know that I made mistakes. So where does that put me? I think I'm probably a B2 on the European framework.
Okay, we have a couple questions related to review. Mr. Helping, could you explain how to use the Anki app to improve English vocabulary? I'd like to know how you use the app. I mean, how you make front side, back side on flashcards. Obviously, I'll let you answer.
I don't use the Anki app.
I'm not sure why this person thinks you do, but
I don't use the Anki app or any other. I don't even do much flashcarding on LingQ, for the simple reason that, even in Arabic, I have 11,000, I think I have 11,000 known words, but I have over 30,000 saved links in Arabic. So how much time would I have to spend on Anki reviewing those 30,000 links, words, phrases that I have saved? I mean, I have an hour a day, which is listening, and that's sort of while I'm doing other things. So that's free time. In other words, I don't have to dedicate myself to language learning. I just listen. Now I have another half hour, 45 minutes to spend. Am I going to spend that reading on my iPad, learning about the history of Iran, learning about of coronavirus in, the Arab world? Or am I going to spend it going through flashcards? So I don't care how efficient the Anki algorithm is, I'm not going to spend my time doing that. So I don't use it for that reason. It's not where I choose to spend my time.
And the reality is you'll never, if you're talking about Russian where you have 90,000 words, you wouldn't never get there using Anki. In fact, the efficiency where you might think you're learning better using a review tool like Anki or our own SRS, in fact, if you want to learn a large number of words to really drive your vocabulary growth, the fastest, most efficient way is by learning it in context. Because as you read along, you encounter your yellow links again, you tap on them. If you don't know what they mean, you look them up. That's a review. Every time you see a word is an opportunity to review it. And it's just much more efficient than any kind of review spaced repetition system, anything like that. It's just not efficient. And while you're doing your in context review, you're listening, you're reading, the sounds of the language, the construction of the language, everything is continuing to soak into your brain. So yeah, we're not big Anki for sure we don't use, although some people love it, and that's great if you love it, and you can export from our vocabulary page in the Anki format and go for it. But I think you probably won't, you can't possibly review enough words that way unless you spend your whole day at it. Is somebody related? Sorry, yeah.
I was just going to add. So say in Russian, I have 90,000 words. And my Russian statistics on LingQ say that I have read over 2 million words of Russian, just on LingQ. I've also read away from the computer. The words that I've read on LingQ, I have listened to. So the amount of listening that I have done, read and listened, both at the same time, while acquiring vocabulary, that has sort of conditioned my brain, made my brain more and more familiar with that language so that I understand it. And I'm listening to these things, as you said, Mark, in context. I think that's a far more valuable thing to do with your time, as opposed to just going through this deck of, isolated words or phrases. But that's just me. Some other people, look at it differently.
I think you can actually.
Oh yeah.
No, I think you can actually do it at the end of the lesson if you only read one thing a day.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it.
I do that sometimes. Yeah.
But if you do extensive reading, it reaches a point in which it's too boring. It's just like a normal classroom, and you will get used to it by reading similar things in the future, and you'll come across all of those words in different tenses as well, so you can compare them. But you just have to sit there all day to review them all.
And probably you pick them up, like if you spend time doing review right away after doing a lesson, you're going to reinforce those words, and maybe you'll learn the words that you're reviewing, feel like you're learning them faster. But it takes a bit of a leap of faith to say, I don't need to review these. I will see them again if they matter. I'll just keep going, moving along, and over time, all of a sudden you realize that, hey, I know a lot of these yellow words. I know them without doing any dedicated review, and like tens of thousands of yellow words. Like I know all of these words because I've seen them enough times. We had another question about, since we're on SRS, someone asking or saying, I hate using SRS systems to learn kanji. What should I do? Asking Steve.
Well, the kanji is the one place where I very much used SRS. But that's 50 years ago. I happen to have them here. I had this 1,000 little flashcards, the original flashcards. And, it had the stroke order, and on the back it had phrases using the character. And I would pick up 10 of them a day, and I would write them on the sheet of paper. And then I would write the meaning a couple columns over, and I'd pick up another one. And I started at 10 a day. I got it up to 30 a day. And this is spaced repetition, because as I take the meaning and park it, say 3 columns over, by the third flashcard, I run into the first one again. So I have to write it again. And I invented SRS long before anyone knew about SRS. This was my homemade system. And of course, I would forget 2/3 of whatever I learned. And but I just kept on doing it and doing it and doing it. Plus, I was reading, and then after the first 1,000, because there were 1,000 in this. This is a fabulous. This is 50 years old, you know, held together by wire. But so that was SRS. But now there's so many systems. Like you know, I don't know. There's probably more efficient systems. But the trouble with the characters, it's like it's almost, yes, it's meaning, yes, but it's not like learning words. They're almost separate things that you have to learn. And I think where SRS is most effective is where you have things that are almost divorced from any context. There's no emotion, there's no connection. It's just these things. You got to learn the names of different birds or something. So to some extent, starting into characters was a bit like that. But eventually, as I got into more and more meaningful content, and I would still try and write them out by hand when I came across new characters. But I found that to get a grip on the characters, I needed to have some kind of a system like that, where that was constantly throwing the characters in front of me so that I could learn them. So that doesn't answer your question, but I'll just say though that there are far more systems now for learning characters, and a little bit of Googling probably will help you find them.
I'd be very curious to see how someone would do just starting in on mini stories without having done any review or flashcarding of characters, and just from the fact that words reappear frequently, you just start to know what the words mean. I have to believe that's the case, because I mean I did some sort of dedicated kanji learning, but I certainly have learned a lot more just by doing lessons on Link and moving through them and seeing characters repeat. And after a while, what's amazing is you'll see a character and wow, I know that word. And like without even trying to think about it, you just automatically kind of know that word. And I don't know, I surprise myself sometimes with the kanji that, oh, actually I know that. I don't know why I know that, but I know it because I've just seen it in enough different situations. So,
and I think it's also good to revise them on the vocabulary part in Link. I'm learning Chinese at the moment, so I could basically learn 10 words a day, let's say, but I think it's useful to see the word and the phrase below, because you can learn 10 words and not be able to use them in a conversation. I just had a lesson a couple of days ago in Chinese, and although I knew 500 words, I couldn't use them properly. So I think what you said before, Mark, is really important, to learn words with context, because if not, it will just be a list that you've memorized.
right. Let's see what else we've got here. Here's a guy, we're kind of on this theme. I wonder how long it usually takes people to reach 20,000, 30,000, whatever known words with Link, specifically with Chinese or Japanese. I must say with Japanese, it's certainly slower going than with Italian, for example, or you know, French, because it's hard to acquire words in Japanese because of the you don't get free words. I mean, in at least as an English speaker, in the Latin languages, there's so many similar words. I can't remember what the percentage is. Something like 75% of English words are Latin based. So once you really get going in those languages, you realize that you know a lot of words even without ever having seen them before. Japanese is definitely a much slower pace of growth, but I assume that you know, yeah, if I just keep going, doing more and more reading, you just have to see the words enough times that you start to learn them. I am having a bit of a challenge in Japanese finding books to read. It just seems like it's more difficult to find ebooks than to be able to import them, and that is my favorite method of really driving vocabulary growth. So maybe Steve, if you have some comments.
Yeah, I would say, of course, I haven't learned Japanese or Chinese on Link, but if I look at my experience with Greek, where the writing system is different and there aren't so many cognates in Greek, and in particular, if I look at Arabic and Persian, to get to 30,000 words, it may even be more difficult in Japanese and Chinese. I think it's 2 years. It's not less than 2 years. Like, it's a long road in those languages. I mean, Romanian was a piece of cake because it's like 70% Italian almost. You know, those are freebie languages. Once you get into the languages where there are very few common, you know, items of vocabulary, different writing system, just takes a long time. On the other hand, it depends how much time you put in daily. Like when I was learning Chinese, I did it 7 hours a day. So on that basis, if you put in more time every day, it can be 1 year. But most people, I think, on LingQ are happy to have an hour or 2 hours a day. So on that basis, it's 2 years. But if you can ramp it up, it's fine. A similar question. I just saw someone said he wants to get to, he or she, you know, Leroy, he wants to get to C2 in Russian. How many words on LingQ? You know, I think if you want to get to C2 on Russian, you got to do literature. You got to do a wide variety of content. You can't just do sort of history or something. I happen to be interested in history because you need a solid grounding in the language. And you have to talk a lot because it's only through a lot of speaking that you will, in my opinion, develop habits of using some of these very difficult aspects of Russian grammar correctly. So I don't speak enough to speak accurately. Like I make mistakes. I don't know how many mistakes, depends on, I guess, at different times I make more or fewer mistakes. But if I'm with people speaking all the time and I hear them using the language correctly, I'm gradually going to start using the language more correctly myself. So I don't know that, 80,000 words is enough theoretically to be reached C2, but you have to do other things with that. You have to read widely and you have to speak a lot.
If I may add something.
Sure.
Yeah, I've seen like in a lot of comments in the gathering, people are like so focused on the number of words, and I find it kind of funny. Maybe it's because I don't have the same mindset regarding learning language, but I think they're so focused on learning a certain amount of words that they don't, at the end, they don't really know how to use like a third of them, a third of the amount, like they don't know how to use it in sentences. And I think like before accumulated like a lot of like vocabulary input, like you really have to practice like speaking and not just listen or just read a lot, but also practice speaking a lot. So even if you have like 1,000 words, I would like, I started like straight away like for Swedish to speak, and it helped a lot with knowing how to use the words. And even if though I just have like 500, I can already like have a small conversation. So I think like yeah, I find it like kind of weird like, to focus like on how I have to get to 20,000 and stuff like that. I don't know if it's just me or.
I think this is a very individual thing. Personally, I didn't used to start speaking till I had 8,000 or 10,000 words. Because I don't like the idea that I'm in a conversation and I don't understand what the other person is saying and I'm struggling to say anything. So that hour that I spend, I would rather spend it trying to acquire more words and more familiarity with the language. But it's very individual. Some people want that. They find it stimulating. Obviously, you realize where you're, what you're lacking. But me, and now with the mini stories, I've started speaking after 3,000 words. That's a major change in my strategy. But even at that, I speak once or twice a week. So speaking once or twice a week at most is not going to have as big an impact on your learning as the hour or two a day that you're spending with the language. So I think that is very personal. It's entirely up to what people like to do. But my own sense is that obviously your passive vocabulary is going to be much larger than your active vocabulary. And it's a good thing that it is, because you have to try to understand what the other person is saying. Comprehension is the core. If you don't understand what the other person is saying, you can't have a conversation. If you understand what the other person is saying and you have some difficulty in saying what you want to say, that's still a conversation. But if you don't understand what the other person is saying and you keep on saying, I beg your pardon, could you repeat that? That's not, for me, it's not comfortable. So, but it's very personal. And as I say, with the mini stories, I find that I have more verbs, I have more momentum, I can get started earlier and engage with a tutor once or twice a week, maybe. But the idea that we have a lot of words that are in our passive vocabulary that we don't use, that's absolutely normal. It has to be. The native speaker has been exposed to the language since early childhood. They will always have a larger vocabulary than we have. And I want to be able to understand what they're saying. And then I have to fit what I have to say around my much more limited vocabulary. But as I gain confidence, if I understand more and I start using the language more, gradually, some of my passive vocabulary will activate, but it'll always be a much smaller set of words and phrases than my passive vocabulary. And I think that's a good thing.
We have a user says, one day I created 700 plus links, yet accumulated only 200 plus known words. Is that a healthy, predictable accrual of known words? Link members tell me my numbers are the opposite of what they should be.
In my
yeah, go ahead.
in my experience, it depends entirely on the language. If you are doing Spanish, and particularly if you know another Romance language, then the known word, there will be fewer links and more known words accumulating, because you will find on a page or in a lesson that might have 500 words, you'll find 50 words that you didn't know, but 450 words that are so similar to words that you know in other languages that bingo, you got 450 known words. In Arabic, every word is new, every word is strange. You're not getting any freebies. So the known words total, and I tend not to go into my list of created links and deliberately try to move them to known. Over time, gradually, I've seen it often enough that, okay, I know this word. So the known words in the more difficult languages where there are fewer items of common vocabulary, the known words accumulate more slowly and you're creating more links. I think that's normal. So it depends on the language.
Yeah, I've definitely found that. And by the way, 700 links in one day, that's pretty good. Pretty good. Certainly in Japanese, it'd be a similar ratio for me. I have way more links created than known words accumulated. And that certainly in Italian for sure was the reverse, as you say, especially once you kind of hit your stride. There's just so many free words that you're getting all these known words all the time. So definitely depends on the language.
I think it depends also on the learner itself, because even though you may recognize a word, there are people who actually highlight it just in case, because they want to know how to write it or how to spell it, and then they'll put it as known a couple of weeks later.
That's a good point. There are people that are also a little bit reluctant to claim words as known because they're not 100% sure that they know it. And and that's personal preference too, but I certainly, like, if I think I know it, it's good enough. If I don't know it, the next time I see it, then I'll click on it and make it a link. There's no real, I think one of the big messages for Link is that we want you to be relaxed. It's not that crucial to be so accurate in your known words. Like, if you think you know it, you probably do good enough. Move on.
Yeah, I tend to go both ways. I'll make it known because, yeah, good enough. I don't totally understand it. Or at other times I'll say, hey, this is a word I wouldn't mind having another look at. I should keep this in focus. So I leave it as a category 2 or category 3. Or sometimes I'll collect a phrase around it and keep the phrase for a while, and then I'll get rid of that phrase.
That's a bit like how Ken keeps his phrases around, which I do as well. I keep my phrases around because I'd like to be able to say it that way, the way they put those words together. Even though I understand the words, I know the words, I'll keep the phrase link like Ken does for sure.
When I'm reading something in Russian that I'm really enjoying and understand pretty well, I'll just keep turning the page and those blue ones will go to known, even if without me stopping to think about them. And sometimes I'll come up to them again in a different context. It won't be so clear. I'll move them back to unknown. Whereas in German, just starting out, trying to learn enough to have a context to understand words in, I'm much more careful and deliberate.
Let's see. I'm currently a B1 in Portuguese. I'm going to Brazil for 2.5 months and will only speak Portuguese. Is a B2 a possibility? Got any tips to get there? I'm currently doing Link every day.
Yeah, my advice is, first of all, if you can afford an Uber or a taxi, in Brazil, those are your best language teachers. They like to talk. You hardly even have to get them going. And it's just a lot of talking. What you need to do is have a lot of speaking practice. You know, you've done a lot of listening and reading now through LingQ. Your big opportunity in Brazil is to speak. So you just got to speak as much as you can. The Brazilians are so friendly, so outgoing. You shouldn't have any difficulty finding people to talk to. But if you haven't got anyone to talk to, call an Uber or a taxi, and you'll get 30 minutes of free Portuguese lessons and get caught up on Portuguese, or at least Brazilian politics.
Here's
B2 is
another.
a possibility. B2 is definitely a possibility. Keep on listening and reading, and just do a lot of speaking.
What do you think about language acquisition for kids by immersing them in more than one language?
Well, I have no experience in dealing with kids, but I think kids should just be exposed to more than one language. They don't have to speak them correctly. They don't have to understand everything. It just makes the brain that much more flexible. They're hearing different sounds. They're hearing, they're following cartoons or whatever in different languages. I think that it's just good for them. Sweden, they can all speak English because they watch so much English language television, and they probably understand 20%, 30%, eventually 50%. So I just think it's good. I think there's far too much emphasis with kids on teaching them, and it's perhaps generally true, teaching them a language with the idea of making them use it correctly, and asking them listening comprehension questions, and trying to, like, they understood 50%. That's okay. They got it wrong. It's okay. Expose kids to the language, 2 or 3 more. I think that's good. That's my view.
Steve Mark, do you appreciate requests for adding languages to LingQ, or does it get annoying / overwhelming? That's I mean, we get a lot of requests for all manner of languages all the time. Yeah, the reality is we can't add all languages all the time. We, at some level, we would like to have as many languages as we can possibly have, but obviously it takes time and effort and resources to even set up a language, never mind to try and populate it with content. A big issue with setting up languages and not really having content is that users who come along and want to study those languages and who don't find much in the way of content blame us for that, even though we're only responding to user requests to add it with limited content. So we've taken the position that unless we have at least the 60 mini stories and ideally some more content, we're not going to add languages. But that if those are created, then we will try to add those languages when we can. We're obviously always doing lots of different things and trying to improve the product, and the reality is that the overwhelming majority of users are not studying like whatever languages we have now. The overwhelming majority of users are using, like we've got most of it covered in terms of volume of learners, but obviously the niche languages, the smaller languages or the less popular languages, we would like to have them too, but they're I don't know if that answers your question. I don't know if annoying or overwhelming, but it's just reality. We can only add a limited number, and we want to have a certain amount of content there before we do.
I tend to be always keen to add languages. Apparently someone did the 60 mini stories in Georgian, so we're going to add Georgian. We'll have 1 or 2 people at most learn Georgian. I see this in Persian. I was very keen to get Persian. Mark didn't want it, but I wanted it because I was doing Arabic. So with my Arabic script, I want to do Persian. And there's lots of Persian speakers here in Vancouver, lots of immigrants from Iran. And so we did the mini stories, and then I've been paying this person in Iran, A, to transcribe podcasts. We got permission from a podcaster. And B, she's been doing this Iranian history series, which is excellent. I think we have perhaps one of the best sources of Persian learning content on the internet. And I know because I have searched the internet, and it's phenomenal what we got. And so then I go and look at how many people are studying this content that we've now paid for, and it's great content. And we're talking about 5, 10. So, it's a bit frustrating. So there's great enthusiasm. Yeah, we should have Tagalog, we should have Thai, we should have Persian, we should have Georgian. And then we go to a lot of trouble and we create the mini stories. Other people volunteer to produce this stuff. And even the mini stories, once you're done with the mini stories, okay, now where do I go? I want to do something else. So then we say, okay, let's invest in getting some other content up there. And it's just not that many people who study it. So Mark's job is to run LingQ. I'm the guy who likes to dabble in languages, but Mark's job is to run LingQ. So he says, we're up, and what we're doing now in terms of improvements at LingQ, which I'm testing in beta, it is phenomenal, but it's a lot of work and doesn't want to be distracted by adding Georgian and whatever, Estonian, other language, just because I want to learn them.
So probably my answer to your question is yes. But at the same time, we do want to support all languages. So I think over time, ideally, we have the ability to add more and more, but it will always be at a limited cadence. It's not going to be, we're never going to add 100 languages all at once and try to offer the most languages of any site out there.
And I should add, there are always issues with each language. Okay, the dictionary. Then someone says that dictionary is no good. Can you add this other dictionary? So in Persian, for example, we don't get text to speech. So I bug Mark. How can I get text to speech in Persian? We got text to speech in Arabic. So he goes around searching for different text to speech providers that might have Persian. So that's work to be done. And now it turns out that with Persian, but not in Arabic, when we import items, some of the text gets squished and you can no longer create links. This happens every third or fourth item that we bring in. So now we've got to research into why does that happen for Persian? So there is no language that's just trouble-free, turn it on. There's always issues. So I understand why Mark is reluctant. I don't admit that to him, but it's true.
Yeah. I think we still have more questions, but we've been going for a while here. So I think we'll call it for today. And we are doing this every week. So please keep your questions and I come back next week and ask them again. We very much appreciate your time, Jade, Ken, Antonio. That was tremendous. I know that both Steve and I and those of us at LingQ and all the rest of our members watching at home, I find it very interesting to see how our members use LingQ and just different perspectives. I think these are really fun to do, the gatherings, and
keep safe, wear your masks, wash your hands.
Absolutely. Okay, bye everybody.
Bye.
Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye.